California is set to become the first state in the nation to phase out the sale of new gas-powered cars. A ban will go into effect 15 years from now. The state's governor says it's the right move for the environment and for business.
I think it's self-evident to anybody who's been paying any attention about the state of California that we've been suffering and struggling through simultaneous crises. And as a consequence, we've been challenged as a state in ways that, frankly, we haven't been in quite some time. Reconcile the fact that we have agency, that we can shape this debate, we can shape our future, that we're not just victims of fate, as well as in the state of California. I don't know any other state in this country that's been more forceful and forthright in establishing and anchoring a consciousness around climate change. But goals are nothing more than dreams with deadlines. We have an obligation to implement those goals, to apply policy to accelerate our ideals and to advance our cause. And today we are advancing just that, particularly in the area of transportation. The transportation sector in the state of California represents over 50%. And we'll do that by setting forth a goal, firm goal, that by 2035, in the next 15 years, we will eliminate in the state of California the sales of internal combustion engines. We will move forward to green and decarbonize our vehicle fleet here in the state of California. As a consequence, substantially reducing greenhouse gas emissions as well as oxide nitrogen, meaning NOx emissions here in the state of California. In so doing, we'll improve air quality as well as improve the economic climate here in the state of California. And so I couldn't be more proud today to be able to sign this executive order moving forward by not denying people the ability to keep their cars after 15 years. You can still keep your internal combustion engine car. You can still have a market for used cars. You can still trade and transfer those cars. We're not taking anything away. We're providing an abundance of new choices and new technology, being agnostic about how we get to zero emissions, but being committed to getting to zero emissions by 2035. And we have a commitment to phase out fracking here in the state of California. Pursuant to this executive order, we will be directing and working very specifically on a legislative strategy to begin the phase out formally of fracking here in the state. And that is a commitment, a firm commitment from this administration, codified in this executive order, that will be advanced January in the new legislative session to advance that cause as well.
Using the hood of an electric-powered Ford Mustang, Governor Gavin Newsom signed an executive order banning the sale of new gas-powered passenger cars by 2035.
If you want to reduce asthma, if you want to mitigate the rise of sea level, if you want to mitigate the loss of ice sheets around the globe, then this is a policy for other states to follow.
The mandate applies only to new cars. Californians will still be able to drive, buy, and sell gas-powered cars on the used car market. Governor Newsom says his order will reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 35%. And not only will it help the environment, he says the electric car mandate will be good for California's economy.
This is the next big global industry, and California wants to dominate it.
California is already home to 34 electric vehicle manufacturers, including top seller Tesla, which announced plans Tuesday to make cheaper batteries. If other states follow California's lead on zero-emission vehicles, it could have a huge impact on the U.S. automobile industry.
6 o'clock, San Francisco will ban natural gas in newly constructed buildings in the city. There are some questioning whether now is the right time to go all electric.
Liz, some are arguing that this transition to go all electric is not the smart move, considering all the PSPS, the public safety power shutoffs that we've seen in the Bay Area recently. Nonetheless, San Francisco is now among at least 30 cities across the state to implement this natural gas ban. The natural gas explosion on Geary Boulevard in February 2019 is one reason the San Francisco Board of Supervisors unanimously voted to ban it in newly constructed buildings starting in June of next year.
Natural gas is is dangerous.
Raphael Mandelman sponsored the legislation.
Maybe most significantly, natural gas is a very potent greenhouse gas that contributes to climate change.
Since 2010, as hundreds of coal-fired power plants have closed, natural gas plants in many cases have replaced them. Energy experts say natural gas produces about 40% of U.S. energy needs. Greenberg doesn't believe California can make the transition from natural gas to all electric.
The state of California does not have the ability to meet the energy needs, electricity needs, and home heating through electricity at this point in time.
We're not going to be relying on fossil fuels anymore in our buildings. There's huge greenhouse gas savings. There's huge public health savings. And actually, cost of construction also goes down because you're not needing to install a gas pipeline.
Environmental groups like Earth Justice cite the growing wildfires as a reason to move away from natural gas and the methane that is produced.
You know, the sky was orange earlier this summer because of all the fires, and we have to do something, and that means getting off fossil fuels.
Greenberg blames transmission lines and not a change in climate.
If there's going to be, unfortunately, wind that's going to cause a transmission line to snap and cause a fire, that has nothing to do with a gas line.
Yeah, so Liz, developers would be able to apply for permits through the end of 2021 to build with these gas lines for commercial kitchens. After that, it gets a little bit more complicated. This is the fine print. Developers would have to apply for a waiver, arguing specifically for a restaurant if they want to build those gas lines into these mixed-use buildings with the restaurants on the first floor.
A bill to allow BART to fast-track its own high-density housing developments is gathering steam in the state legislature. And there would be almost no limit to what BART could build in your backyard.
The Assembly bill acts as a zoning end-around for the transit agency to put up housing near its stations. Individual cities would have very little say in it.
Everyone agrees the Bay Area needs more housing. And BART believes building high-density transit villages next to its stations is the way to go. But it hasn't been easy.
Project after project that has gone in on BART land has been dragged out for decades by local zoning processes which are not efficient.
BART Director Nick Josefowicz says the transit village at the Pleasant Hill station is a housing success story that could be emulated across the Bay Area.
But there are other communities who haven't been as forward-thinking and who haven't allowed in their zoning for as much density.
So in February, allies in the legislature decided to force the issue with Assembly Bill 2923. The bill, as introduced, would authorize BART to ignore local zoning rules, create its own building standards, and require that cities conform to BART's development plans for any of its properties within a half mile of a station, like here in downtown Concord.
We have to change our rules to match for their property. And this is like giving the developer, all right, a blank check. Build whatever you want.
Concord Mayor Eddie Burson and angry officials from other BART cities went to Sacramento and got the bill amended to give communities some say in things like building aesthetics and a height restriction of one floor greater than the tallest building zoned for the area, which at Concord would be this 20-story office building. That means BART could build a 21-story high-density housing unit here, and the city would have no choice but to accept it. Director Deborah Allen, who opposes the bill, says if BART, as the landowner, can sidestep local density rules, it can make a lot more money.
The value of the land is always increased when a developer can put more units on the land, which generates more revenue.
One key to that is parking. Under AB 2923, BART could limit or even eliminate parking altogether in its projects, decreasing costs and increasing the number of housing units, but sending tenants' cars out onto the streets for Concord to deal with.
We can literally have people from Oakland and San Francisco deciding what gets built in Concord.
It shifts a little bit how that collaboration works, and it shifts it in a way to kind of push forward projects.
If AB 2923 becomes law, BART could end up establishing a new model for housing in the Bay Area. And while opponents may doubt the transit agency's competency to do that, it does have a lot of experience with high density.
From Uber's new offices in Oakland to condos in Concord, if you are near a BART station, chances are you are also in the middle of a new building boom. and a gold mine for developers as well.
Places that can take people from point A to B to C easily are the ones that people want to live in.
BART estimates that major developments are going up within a mile of 3/4 of its 45 stations. Developments like downtown Oakland's Hive, a mix of offices, shops, and housing that are the work of private developers who are zeroing in on the new no-car market.
Investors look at walk scores now as a component to whether or not they want to fund or lend money to projects.
Like these apartments on what used to be a parking lot next to the Pleasant Hill BART station. Now it's the home for many like Scott Luther.
I have a 2-bedroom here for about $2,500, 2-bed, 2-bath, and it would be like $4 or $5 grand in the city.
But it also means a big change in neighborhoods all over the Bay Area, like these developments along Oakland's Broadway or along what was once a thriving auto row.
Our expectation within a 10-year window is we'll add about 100,000 new riders.
BART critics see trouble as well, especially in the suburbs.
They're expanding at a time where they cannot even take care of the basic system today.
It's a sardine can now. What's it going to be like with all these new riders?
Well, I mean, BART's a 40-year-old system, so we're struggling with both aging pains and growing pains at the same time. We're reconfiguring the cars to allow more people to get on. Over the medium term, then it would be getting the region and the BART and the federal government to invest in 300 more train cars, upgrading our train control system, more traction power upgrades.
California's new law that requires BART to build housing at its stations is as much about local control as it is about transforming parking lots into transit villages.
The bill is unnecessary. It was a power grab by BART and their supporters. The issue is not whether we want more housing in the area around BART, it's how you do it.
You know, you can already start to see it.
But BART Director Rebecca Saltzman says the district will proceed responsibly now that Assembly Bill 2923 is law and won't force a plan on any municipality.
There's creative ways to address this, and we've always approached it in a partnership with cities, and we'll continue to do that.
Dublin and Oakland already have housing at several stations. Pleasant Hill has long had a transit village and hundreds of units, with more under construction. And Walnut Creek has approved a project that will include a total replacement of existing parking.
There is a massive floodgate just north of Baton Rouge called the Morganza Spillway. Essentially, it's a giant emergency pressure valve, but it hasn't been open since 1973, and frankly, no one really is sure what will happen if they do open it. Theoretically, the spillway would divert floodwaters from the Mississippi River into a bayou called the Atchafalaya Basin and on into the Gulf of Mexico from there. And that should prevent the brunt of the storm from spilling into Baton Rouge and flooding LSU. And the Morganza is not the only emergency valve along the Mississippi.
That it's not a matter of if, but rather when they will actually pull the plug and open up that Morganza spillway. They're actually evacuating a nursing home. Employees and even family members packing up boxes and getting people to higher ground because they say with all this uncertainty, it's simply way too risky. So when that Morganza spillway is open, Shepard, areas like Morgan City could see floodwaters anywhere from 5 to 20 feet deep. Yeah, you know, this right now is releasing enough water to spill into and actually fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Every second, we are talking about massive amounts of water. Right now, we're actually on top of the Bonacary Spillway, which takes water from the Mississippi River right over here and dumps it into the floodway down below. From here, it's a 6-mile stretch over to Lake Pontchartrain, where the water is eventually released into the Gulf of Mexico. Shepard, it's important that we remember that the Mississippi River helps drain water from 31 states. So to give you an analogy of like a highway, there are a lot of on-ramps, but the main off-ramp is down here in Louisiana in the Gulf of Mexico. So all of that water in Memphis, all of that water in Louisiana, Tennessee, Mississippi, it's all heading this way.
It's a Texas-sized proposal, the Trans-Texas Corridor, I-69, a combination of rail lines, utility lines, car and truck lanes, which will be the width of 3 football fields laid end to end, 3 times wider than a typical interstate. It will run from Laredo to Texarkana, but the project is attracting some Texas-sized opposition at town meetings throughout the state.
This is a terrible idea and a terrible attack on property rights. It amounts to a 4,000-mile laceration of concrete and steel inflicted upon the good people of Texas.
And many say it's all for the good of multinational corporations.
The plan is to ship cheap goods produced by under-market labor in China and the Far East into North America via Mexican ports.
Roughly $150 billion worth of imports from Mexico came into the U.S. via Texas roadways in 2006, according to the Texas Department of Transportation, which is why they say the corridor is needed. But at what cost?
Why do we need this corridor? Well, somebody's going to get rich, and there's not going to be anybody in this room here.
The I-69 corridor will cut through rural farmland, land that in many cases has been in the family for generations. The state vows to use eminent domain to take that land. Those farmers and ranchers vow in return they will fight the state, including this promise from a Marine serving in Iraq. His letter was read for him.
If not, you can count on me to fight you at every meeting, and there is nothing stronger than a United States Marine fighting for his home.
They're taking our homes, they're taking our land, they're taking it to lease it out, to lease out our infrastructure and our highways in this state to foreign companies and private investment. We only have 2 small cities in Trinity County, and it's going to devastate both of them. It cuts a 1,200-foot swath. It goes right through the river bottoms where our water comes out of and the wells. It goes right through our aquifers where our other well water is. It goes through archaeological sites and historic cemeteries.
I have family buried in those cemeteries. And now I guess I'm supposed to just stand aside and allow the same state of Texas that they have established pay them over in their graves?
The TTC is not just lines on the map. To us Texans, those lines represent utter and total destruction to our homes, farms, land, heritage, being, and way of life here in Texas.
Never would they have believed there are Texans today who would use eminent domain to strip other hard-working Texans of their land.
Why would I even consider giving my land that my ancestors died for to a foreign country?
You're going through the historic cradle of the Republic of Texas and wiping out a vast majority of the land.
More Mexican trucks will soon be allowed unrestricted access to U.S. highways under a program required by the North American Free Trade Agreement. Teamsters gathered at the San Diego Commercial Truck Crossing to protest a decision they say endangers American lives and jobs. Currently, Mexican trucking companies not operating in the United States before 1982 are prohibited from carrying cargo beyond a 25-mile border crossing zone. The Bush administration's one-year pilot program will open up all U.S. highways to as many as 100 additional Mexican trucking companies.
The long-term dream here is that someday all the trucks in America will be driven by people who work for less than the minimum wage in the United States of America and be exempt from it because they would be Mexican truck drivers based in Mexico and paid under Mexican law.
Critics say Mexican trucks and their drivers are not required to meet the same safety, work rule, or drug testing standards demanded of American trucking companies.
A Mexican driver could be on the road for 10 hours before coming to the border and then be allowed to drive another 10 hours in the United States.
Congress has passed legislation that has slowed but failed to stop the Mexican truck program.
There is no NAFTA superhighway, not officially. Some even call it the invention of the far right wing. But some politicians find the denials almost laughable.
The folks in Washington are in denial about the Super NAFTA highway, or whatever you want to call it. It's the concept that there will be a highway, free trade, from Mexico through the central part of the United States all the way to Canada.
In Texas, planning and development is underway for what are officially called transportation corridors. The Trans-Texas Corridor, I-69, a combination of rail lines, utility lines, car and truck lanes, planned to be as wide as 3 football fields laid end to end. It will be financed by a private foreign company, most likely Spain's Centra, who will then own the lease on the road and the revenue generated by the tolls. Texas may use eminent domain to lay claim to some of the land needed to build it. For an imaginary road, there is a lot of money and effort involved and some very real opposition.
There's just no doubt that this is happening.
We've been to the public hearings. We've seen the presentations. We've seen the documents. We've waded through them.
The lawmakers concerned about the impact of increased traffic flowing into Kansas City, where an intermodal center known as the Kansas City Smart Port is being developed to capitalize on the flow of goods from Mexico's port of Lázaro Cárdenas to the nation's heartland. The Smart Port website says it offers, quote, the heart of a rail corridor spanning coast to coast across the U.S. and extending from Canada to Mexico, a NAFTA railway. And what drives it all? Imports. The U.S. Business and Industry Council, a business group, says in the past 10 years, imports from and passing through Mexico rose by 326%.
Mexican truck drivers may soon haul cargo deep into the heart of the United States. They're currently limited to within 20 miles of the U.S. border. It could mean U.S. job losses and serve as a gateway for human and drug smuggling.
This would basically make a driver from Mexico be able to freely go about throughout the United States. And to us, that's scary from a safety standpoint, but it's especially scary from the standpoint of security.
Critics say U.S. sovereignty is also on the line. To understand, go back to 2005. President Bush, Mexican President Vicente Fox, and then Canadian Prime Minister Paul Martin launched what's called the Security and Prosperity Partnership, a trade and economic partnership that many see as a precursor to a North American Union modeled after Europe.
There's hardly a major area of public policy where the Bush administration has not, through the SPP working groups, rewritten our administrative law and regulations from being U.S. in nature to being North American in nature.
The coalition to block the North American Union wants to defeat a proposed NAFTA superhighway that would stretch from Texas all the way to Canada. Congress has been left largely out of the loop.
They never even heard of this. They don't know a thing about it. What's going on? Well, what's going on is a super elite are taking control.
Lawmakers who have heard are hell-bent on keeping a North American Union from happening.
It's known as the TTC, the Trans-Texas Corridor, I-69, or just the NAFTA superhighway.
1, 2, 3, 4.
It's highly controversial. The proposed route from Laredo, Texas to Texarkana, Texas would be a 4,000-mile network of new toll roads with truck and car lanes, rail lines, pipeline, and utility zones. Its projected cost, $183 billion over 50 years. The purpose of the Trans-Texas Corridor would be to speed up the movement of goods from Mexico to proposed inland ports in America. And that's not going over well with thousands of people in the way of the massive project who've shown up at town hall meetings held by the state.
Citizens here are not going to bear the burden so Walmart can get their cargo into the U.S. cheaper and faster.
So far, none of the companies interested in financing the corridor are American. And among its opponents, presidential candidate and Texas Congressman Ron Paul.
We don't know exactly what the long-term plan on or what the motivation is. Is this part of the North American Union, or is this just to enhance travel in Texas? And I suspect it's a lot more, and it's very costly. It involves millions of acres that may be taken under eminent domain. And besides that, everybody I've run into in Texas, the people here don't want it.
The Texas Department of Transportation notes that 3/4 of the traffic coming out of Mexico to the U.S. comes through Texas. It argues that Texas has to find a way to accommodate the traffic and fund the corridor's construction.
Everyone in the international trade community is interested in understanding the new specifics, changes, and updates associated with the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA. First, it is important to note the elements that will not change. The USMCA continues to eliminate tariffs for most goods between Canada, Mexico, and the United States. Importers making a USMCA claim on their merchandise will continue to use the Automated Commercial Environment, or ACE, to request USMCA preferential treatment on their entries. Now, trade engagement on specific commodity groups will continue to be conducted via the Centers of Excellence and Expertise and other CBP offices you are familiar with. There are, however, some significant changes that the trade community should note. The USMCA does not require a certificate of origin form like NAFTA did. Instead, the USMCA requires the collection of certain data elements, which can be presented to CBP in many forms, including a certification of origin, invoices, and other documentation. The USMCA does not require a prescribed format to present the required entry data to CBP, much like other recent trade agreements. There are also new specific criteria for certain commodities. For example, there are additional criteria for automotive imports. These new requirements include increased regional value content from NAFTA's required 62.25% to 75%. Brand new criteria for demonstrating the importer's overall procurement of North American originating steel and aluminum, and the introduction of required information on the wages paid at manufacturing facilities producing the parts later assembled into the final imported vehicle, called labor value content. Details on compliance for importers for these new and novel criteria will be rolled out to the private sector via webinars, regulations, and our website in the near future. CBP is working closely with the trade community on the USMCA implementation to prepare for a smooth and comprehensive transition.
It's time to get that daily news. I ain't watching TV, I'ma log on to YouTube. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Talking about that raw, uncut news. You a fool. You believe that mainstream and local news. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. And 411, keep the 411. On a sensitive subject, keep it 100. Don't bite no tongue. If you cannot take the truth, then this is finna hurt. Who's to say if it's a round or a flat earth? Stick to the facts. What's some feelings? I don't do no capping. Read that paper, seen that news. Now you know what happened. Playing a pretty picnic. They control that weather. Same crisis actors, like we don't know no better. Thing about the truth always come to the light. Pile of is too many. All bark, no bite. Like muscle, no might. I don't know what happened to them, but I know the way they said somebody that ain't right. It's time to get that daily news. I ain't watching TV, I'ma log on to YouTube. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Talking about that raw, uncut news. You a fool. You believe that mainstream and local news. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe.
Has begun to sing. San Francisco resident Anna Clafter can hear it from her house about 5 miles away.
And I watched the video and I was like, what a crazy sound. And then after it ended, I heard the sound in the background. It's quite loud, actually. Since then, I've been hearing it almost every afternoon or evening.
What is the source of this strange sound? It can be traced to a new safety upgrade to the bridge.
We've been replacing handrail on the west sidewalk with new railing that has thin vertical slats that are designed to allow more air to flow through them. One effect of that is that the bridge, now at very high winds and with specific angles, sings or hums. We knew going into the replacement that the bridge would sing during high wind events. But what we didn't know was just how loud that might be. Some people love it and find it soothing and meditative. Others have found it somewhat unpleasant.
Electronic musician Mr. Bill was inspired to collaborate with the bridge.
So I rode my bike like right into the middle of the bridge, and then I just took a field recorder with me and recorded it and then turned it into music. I was just working on a few tracks at the time, and that one just happened to be slightly closer to being in the key of the bridge.
Engineers are looking into the possibility of dampening the sound. But until then, when the wind is right, it's showtime.